This evening, John D. from Monroe, Louisiana.
Hi everybody, I'm John and I am powerless over alcohol. Monroe, doesn't matter, you know, it's that other LA. The one where it floods and they have oil spills and we have hurricanes, so thank God I came out here and the weather is beautiful. It's a little windy, but you know what? I think we can handle that after some of the stuff we've been handling back home. I am so grateful to the AALA Roundup Committee for asking me to come out here and share my story. Don, Lorraine, Digby, thank you all very much for sending me this invitation. I am humbled by this, and I'm up a little bit, okay? I never know. Sometimes I overproject, you know, because I have one of those voices that it can be a little overpowering, and so thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. I am here to tell you tonight that I am still on an incredible journey thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is one that started in 1992 on Thanksgiving weekend. And what I've come to learn about this journey is it is about the journey. For so long in my life, I always thought it was about the destination, that if I get to this part of my life, if I make this pinnacle, if I reach this goal, I will have finally arrived. And after successive failures in trying to get to that destination in my alcoholism, I'm so glad that a higher power and the people who came in these rooms before me helped show me how to finally attain some peace, some serenity, and enjoy the road. The road we trudge, the road we skip, whatever. It's just the road, and it's not about where I'm trying to get to. It's all about getting there and getting there with you. I am from a little town in Louisiana, born and raised near Shreveport, which is near Texas. We may as well have been in Texas. And I was adopted by my parents, wonderful people. My brother and I both adopted in the early 1950s. My dad had been in the military, and he and my mom went around the country with him when he was at this base and that. He was in World War II and then in Korea, and came home, and they'd waited a little late to have children. And they wanted to have boys, and they adopted my brother in 1953, and they adopted me in 1956. I was 3 days old. I was an adoption where they didn't know until 1 week before that they were going to be able to have a boy. They had gone through a home for my brother. I was a private adoption, and the doctor said, I have a baby. Can you be ready in a week? We were loved in that household. We were always told that we were chosen by people who loved us, and that made us feel special. And we just loved the fact that, you know, had things been very different back then, we might not have been in that family or might not have even been on this earth. So I'm grateful for the way our parents raised us and let us know how much they appreciated us being in their lives. And it was just wonderful. And as a result, I grew up on this little cattle ranch, dairy farm in rural Louisiana. And I always knew I was gay. Always. I liked the cows and things. I didn't like to feed them. I liked the horses. I didn't like to ride them. I liked to look at them. They were very pretty. I liked their manes. I thought their manes were really pretty. And as a result of my mom just sort of letting me be what I want to be, I just was free to be at a very young age. I was an inquisitive child. I loved to ask questions. I loved to read books. I learned to read at an early age. I began writing at an early age. And I just felt like I could do anything. especially living out there in the country like we did. If I wanted to go roam around on the back 40, I could go do that. If I wanted to go fish with my grandmother, we'd grab cane poles and go down to the pond. At 5 years of age, I'll never forget this, one of my earliest memories that kind of gave me an inclination I'm a little different than most boys. My mom had taken my brother and I to Shreveport, which is the nearest city, to go see a movie. And we went to one of the department stores downtown just before the film. And it was one that I loved to go up and go and rummage through the men's clothes. And they had a whole section of Boy Scout uniforms, which I thought was a little interesting. But I went by the purses downstairs where the women's, well, not Ferragamo, the women's purses were there, and there, up on the display case, was this little green purse, vinyl purse. Could have been leather, I don't know. It was vinyl. And it had a cute little gold chain. And I looked up at my mother and I said, I want that. And she bought it for me. Now my brother looked on in disdain. I didn't care. I had my purse. So we walked out of Selber Brothers, and we walked down around the corner to the Strand Theater and walked inside. And it was a Disney movie. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was a Disney movie. And I got my ticket, and I opened my purse, and I took my ticket stub, snapped it shut. I didn't know it, but I was into Chanel at age 5. Freedom to be. Freedom to be. As I grew older, some of my friends in school and I became a little more curious, maybe than some boys at that age. And I had a best friend who lived down the road from me. He was a year older than me, and down the road meant about a mile. And I was allowed to ride my bicycle back and forth to his house, and he would come to mine. And I was down there one day, and we were out in the barn. You know, we all got barns, and you know what might happen in barns. Sure enough, we were out there, and some pieces of clothing had been removed, and we're just, being curious. We're just being curious. One of the farm hands was curious about us being curious. And he went back to the house and told my friend's mother what we were doing. We came out, put our clothes on, and she brought us inside, and she told him to go in the other room, and she said, I know what y'all have been doing back there, and that is wrong. And I'm sending you home right now. I'm not going to tell your mother what you did. "8 years old, and I'm taking the bicycle ride of shame down to my home." That was the first inkling I had that I really should be careful maybe about being what I am and feeling the feelings that I have, and that maybe I should just put my guard up a little bit. I'm a smart kid. I'm figuring out that I'm not really supposed to act like this. Because we were adopted, not everyone in my extended family accepted my brother and me. I had a lot of cousins. My mom had 3 brothers, and each one of them had 3 sons and a daughter. And out of that group, there were a handful who never treated my brother and I like they did the other blood relatives. They always treated us like we were just a little bit different, not quite as good, that we don't belong, that we don't fit in, and we're not one of them. And it got to the point where every now and then we'd have 2 or 3 of them over to our house. And this almost always happened at our house, and I can't quite figure out to this day why. But we'd have them over, and some of the older ones, who were 4 and 5 years older than me, they wanted to experiment sexually themselves. and I'm the one that they used. So I later learned in sobriety and in recovery, there's a term for that. It's not playing around with your cousins. It's not having some fun stuff in the bedroom while your parents don't know. It's sexual abuse. It's sexual abuse. And this went on for a while, for a couple of years maybe. I don't have an exact recollection. Now, on the one hand, I just feel horrified when my cousins come at me. On the other hand, why do I feel this is right? What's going on with that? And then my brother, who I thought was my protector, allowed some of this to happen. And at a very young age, I copped a big resentment against my brother. One that carried a long, long time until, thankfully, through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a way to deal with it. Once again, don't be you. If you say something to somebody, and I never spoke a word about what happened with my friend, what happened with the cousins, I never spoke a word of that to my mom or my dad. But I felt that shame. You know, it's my fault. What's wrong with me? So all of those feelings of the little boy who thought he could just be anything and be himself and be happy, joyous, and free just closed in. 10, 11 years old, I'm moving into my teens, and now I'm different. I'm kind of closing into myself. I discovered photography, and I discovered I loved photography, and I had a dark room. Come to find out, it'd be the first of many dark rooms that I liked. But I liked being in this one because I could be by myself and I could create, and I loved it. And my parents were once again, very supportive of anything that I endeavored to do, and I was good at it. I even made a little bit of a living at it during my teenage years. I shot weddings and I shot parties and graduations and things, and that became sort of my escape. And I thought I developed an interest in the opposite sex, which is what my buddies did. My buddies, my 3 running buddies, they're the ones who were there when I took my first big swig of alcohol. We were 14. In the country, when you go camping, which is what we did a lot on weekends, you don't like go grab your tent and go pack up your truck and go off to the lake or to the beach. You basically got in the pickup, got something to drink, and you went on to the back 40 or by the pond back there. That's what we did. 14 years old, my friend Greg, who was always getting me into trouble, had brought some wine. Oh, man, can't wait to try it. Drank it. Oh, it was nasty, but it felt right. It felt warm going down, and it felt like, oh my God, I'm an adult. And I drank until I got drunk, and I got drunk until I blacked out, and they told me when I blacked out that I threw up. And when I came to, I wanted more. And that was just the first night of the camp out. The second night, we drank again. Off and on during my teenage years, I didn't date much, stayed in my photography, but I began to experiment more and more with alcohol. A lot of times just by myself and sneak a beer off here, or I'd be with my buddies there. But my alcoholism hadn't really kicked in because it really didn't have an opportunity to. I didn't give it a chance to really get in there and get going like I did when I got into college. And one other thing I need to mention while I was talking about the sexual abuse and moving through my teenage years, and this was sort of the last thing that made me sit up and wonder, why do I have to keep secrets? Before I had a driver's license, I used my photography to go shoot some pictures at a church in a nearby town, a Catholic church, where the priest was having his jubilee. And he found out about the young guy who was taking pictures for the 4-H club and for the school, and he wanted me to come down there and shoot his portrait. So my mother drove me down to Father's, the rectory, drove me down to the rectory. And I got to know Father. Hell, he was a great guy. I come in there with my cameras. He's like, hey, look, we've got a little wine back here. You want a little wine? I'm like, well, I need to do my thing here. He says, well, look, you can come back some other time and you can have that. So I did the photography, and he was very gregarious and outgoing and very nice. And my mother picked me up, and I remember telling my mother, what a nice guy this guy. I mean, we were Methodist. I didn't know anything about people who were Catholic. I said, what a nice guy this priest is. I said, I'll have your proofs back in about a week. So in about a week, took the proofs back. Mother dropped me off. And there we are in the rectory, and he's going through his proofs. And we're sitting in the living room. He's kind of like got his arm around me. And he says, I've got some of that wine in there if you want some wine. And I was just beginning to get a little creeped out, a little scary. He says, come in here, I want to show you something. We went into the bedroom of the rectory. And he brings out a magazine, and it's got photographs of men and women having sex. And the next thing I know, he's got his hand down my pants. I think I'm the only Protestant kid that ever got molested by a Catholic priest. Mixed signals, a life full of mixed signals, both growing up and then getting grown. Spent my first year at LSU. That is the #1 party school in America. You know why? Because you're an hour from New Orleans. That's why. No one ever stayed in Baton Rouge on weekends. They'd all triddle off to New Orleans for their partying. And I was right there with them. I pledged to fraternity. We were on Bourbon Street every week, sometimes 2 or 3 nights out of the week. And this is when my pattern began to be set. And that pattern is, go get that first drink, and then all bets are off. I never can take just one drink. I have no clue where the rest of them are going to take me. I take that first drink, and the next thing you know, I am feeling like I am 10 feet tall. I can go out here and do anything. I can take on anybody, and usually did, because there was always a lot of fighting going on, it seemed. For a gay boy, I fought a lot, even though I didn't know I was gay then. This all went on through Mardi Gras. This is about 9 months later, and the next thing you know, I flunked out of LSU, and I have to go home with my tail tucked between my legs and tell my parents I spent too much time on Bourbon Street. And I came home with pneumonia. And then sat out the rest of the summer and thought, I'll go to a journalism school. I was in journalism at the time. I'll go to a journalism school in a much smaller town between Shreveport and Vicksburg, Mississippi, Louisiana Tech University. So off I went. I had no more than gotten there and been there a week, and I met a woman, and 9 months later, we were married at age 19. In retrospect, it was John trying to fit in once again. I felt like an outsider. I didn't know why, but I felt like one. It was my pathology that was creeping up, and I had no clue what it was at the time. I just did what I thought I was supposed to do, and in the process, I not only married a woman who loved to drink just like I did, and we had these huge half gallons of Jack Daniels around the house, but I married a woman from an alcoholic family. And boy, they were rageaholics, and I saw firsthand what her parents were like. It was George and Martha, baby, let me tell you. And no matter what I did, I couldn't fit in. They thought I was just a little country boy down here. I can't drink like they do. Well, I showed them. Of course, in the process, what I began to show them was the real me. 1 year after we were married, I'm in school. We're in school over at Tech. It's like just totally out of the blue. I'm sitting in the quad one day between classes, and I'm checking out guys. And I'm going, I'm checking out men. And one thing leads to another over the next several weeks, and I'm in the library checking out books about homosexuality. And I sought out the one teacher that I thought was gay, that everybody said was gay, and even went and talked to him about it. And all he did was say, just be who you are, but be careful. This is Louisiana. This is the South. And they do things to homosexuals here they don't do in other places. Well, that didn't really help me at all. What helped me was alcohol. And my pattern in college now was to find an excuse, send my wife to Shreveport to go visit her mother, spend the weekend over there. I'd stay in Ruston. Go visit your sister who lives in another city. In other words, take 2 or 3 days off every now and then so that I can go to the gay bars in the nearby cities and I can start my prowling. And that's what I did. That's what I did for the remaining 4 years of my marriage. The blackouts began. The book says it, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. Now, a lot of my story is wrapped up into my sexuality, and here's why that is. It's this constant wheel that keeps turning. It's be who you are, which means be gay, which means to go act on being gay, which means to act on being gay, you have to take a drink. You take one drink, you have a second drink, you have a third drink. Then you start acting with somebody who's gay, and the next thing you know, you're waking up out of a blackout and you're sitting in a car, you don't know where you are, or you're in a house, in a bed with someone strange beside you. And then you go home, and you're like, oh my God, does she know? Does she suspect? Can I just say I fell asleep here, or can I make up an excuse? And then the guilt comes in. And the guilt stays with me until the feelings come up, and then the pattern starts over again. And I take that pattern from my time in college, after we graduate, and into my young adulthood and my first career in radio. And the pattern's always the same. It's never any different. It always starts out with making an excuse, getting out, having the drink, the liquid courage to go out and do it. And there's the shame, the walk of shame coming back home. And eventually I just realized I can't do this anymore. Here's what led me to end that marriage. I had gone out riding around one night. This is what we do in small towns. You know, it's what you used to do in the 50s, I guess. In Louisiana in the 70s, this is what we did. In early 80s, we rode around. And I rode around one night, and I parked in a parking lot, and there was a guy in a Corvette. I knew who he was, good-looking guy. And I parked next to him, and he had a little bottle of Jack Daniels. And the next thing you know, he's in my car, and we are riding around. And the next thing I know, I have awakened from a blackout, and he is not in the car. And I don't know quite how I got 15 miles away from where we started. What happened to him? Where is he? Where am I? What the fuck? So I'm, okay, well, just drive back to town. I mean, what are you going to do? Go back and maybe see if his car is in the parking lot. So I drive back to town, and I get about a mile outside of the city limits. Cop stops me. He comes up and he says, follow me to the police station. This was back when they'd just follow you. I mean, my God, I was drunk as a dog. It didn't matter. He's just follow me to the police station. Drove up down there, walked inside, and there is my buddy, and he's crying, and he's bruised, and he's cut. And I have no clue to this day what happened. My wife and my mother-in-law came to get me and drove me home. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't try to be true to me and act out on my feelings and at the same time try to be married, try to be in a marriage and suit everybody else and make everybody else be happy. And so I ended the marriage at age 24. I also made a change, a little bit of a geographical change, and I moved an hour and a half east to Monroe, a nice little town on the Ouachita River. And I got a job. I moved from radio news to television news, and I got a job as an anchor there, a job that I keep today. Now, I start getting a little more free with myself. But I'm also tempered by the fact that nobody wants to know that the anchorman is gay, and B, the anchorman is an alcoholic. Fortunately, I liked my job so well, I didn't drink during the week in the evenings. In fact, the reason I replaced him is because he went on the air one night after drinking between the 6 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock, he comes on and says, "Good morning." So I was very clear, I don't need to do that. Thank God, whatever it took, I did not drink Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. But my stuff starts 10:30 p.m. on Friday night, and I go through the weekend. So I used to say I'm a binge drinker. That was before I really realized that if I had worked a different shift, or maybe I'd been in a different job, I would have binged every day. I would have had alcohol every day. So thank God for small little favors that my higher power was doing for me, and I didn't even know it was happening. This is when I also began my MO of taking a hostage or two. I took a couple of hostages along the way. My first hostage was same age as me, early 20s. We were batshit crazy. We drank like we were crazy. He was a drag queen, and we drove all over the country, so he would do drag. And again, if anybody ever found out, they'd fire me in a heartbeat. And we fed into each other's alcoholism and drug abuse. And we split up after a few years, but several years later, I got a call from him out of the clear blue, and this was about a year before I got sober. I got a call from him, and he says, "John, I just wanted to call and let you know where I am, and that I've been sober. I've been clean for about a year." And I said, "Clean from what?" He said, "Drugs." I said, "You didn't take that many drugs." He goes, "My God, were you that drunk?" I always thought he was just like me, an alcoholic. Come to find out, he was a drug addict too. And he said, "I wanted to make amends for anything," I'm paraphrasing because I'm not going to remember exactly. "I wanted to make amends for anything that I did to hurt you and let you know that I was sober." And I thought, this is the strangest phone call. But I was civil, and I said, "Okay, well, great to hear from you. Bye." Second hostage I took was considerably, he was about 9 years younger than me. And he turned out to be an alcoholic and a drug addict. Who was it said, first night out, I think the first speaker, "My picker's broken." Well, mine's too. Picked a really good one. And then this one was a rageaholic and an enabler. All of this at the tender age of 19. We had, on the outside, a really good-looking life. I had my career. He was in school. Then he took a job with a law firm doing some of the back-end work with the books. We ran with what we thought were the good crowd. We had nice cars. We had beautiful barware, glassware. Oh, I love that stuff. I love all that crystal and that stuff on the stem. It's beautiful. It spoke to me. That was part of my love affair with alcohol. We had it all. Although I couldn't really drink martinis on the stem because they always kind of wound up like this, and I didn't want to spill any of the gin. But our relationship was sick from the beginning, and it remains sick until the end. And I regret and have made amends for some of the things that I did while I was in this relationship. What happened was we had a big blowout on Thanksgiving weekend in 1992. We'd planned to have a bunch of our friends over after they'd had Thanksgiving. They'd come to our house on that Friday. We'd cooked a lot of food. We were all ready to entertain. And we already knew things were a little strained because he was telling me when I would come home from our weekends out with our friends, "Look at you. You're drunk again. Look what you did. Do you even remember what you did last night?" He made me feel just so shameful. And once again, I'm on that pattern. I'm on that little treadmill, the shame, the guilt, the drinking, the blackout, the behavior, the drinking, just on and on. So that weekend, of course, like good alcoholics do, I thought I'd go to a pre-party. Have a drink before we have a drink, because that's what I like to do. I didn't like to just have a social situation where I'm just starting with everyone else. I want to be a little loosened up. So we go to the other alcoholic's house that I call my friend, and we had a little too much. And on the way home, I am literally in the car. He's driving, and I'm leaning back in the seat, and I'm kicking him, saying what a shithead he is, how much I hate his guts, and I cannot wait to get home and go to bed so we can have our big party. Well, we get home, and we didn't just go to bed. The fight started. The food was flying, and so were the fists. And on Saturday morning, after all this had been canceled on Friday, I woke up in the fetal position on the sofa in my living room. And he was gone. And I stayed on the sofa pretty much that day, and I just sort of stayed all to myself that whole weekend. And I thought, maybe this is step A. I thought, this shit has got to stop. So here I am, I'm in my mid-30s, and my behavior is such that I can't stand myself anymore. And I don't really know who I really am. Am I really this so-called out gay person? Am I really somebody who's just hiding behind a facade? Am I really just a freaking alcoholic? What is my deal? And really, alcoholic, that term didn't even come into play yet. It was just like, what was wrong with me? So on Monday, I thought I need to see if my nose is broken because it wasn't healing up and it was bruised. Fortunately, I had a good physician there in Monroe named David, and his wife, Jane, is a nurse. And Jane was one of my oldest friends. Jane, Nurse Jane, she was also a big fag hag, loved the gay boys, and we loved her. And one of the reasons we loved Jane is because she always had the best drugs, those who took drugs with her, and the best alcohol. We had a Mardi Gras party. She'd take a water cooler and she'd fill it full of red wine. And we'd just sit there and drink it all night. Oh, we loved Jane, and she loved us. And so I called her and I said, I need to come in and see David. I think I've got a broken nose. Eric and I were in a big fight Friday. And she says, come in the back door. Wear a little makeup. So I did. And I go into the office and I'm explaining to Jane, who knows that we are a volatile couple. I'm explaining to her what's going on with my life and what happened this weekend. And there's somebody else who struck up a chord in my brain by saying, for the first time that anyone had ever told me or asked me this question, John, do you think you might be an alcoholic? I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. But I'm just tired of this. I'm tired of all the fighting. She said, you know there's a reason why you haven't seen much of me for the last year. I'm sober. Jane is one of those people we never, ever thought would get sober. She went to a treatment center, to AA, to another treatment center, and she never put together more than a few months at a time. She said, I've managed to put together a year of sobriety. And I've been doing it with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been doing it with this addiction counselor named Jeannie. Would you like her number? And I said, yes. And I called Jeannie as soon as I got home. Something inside me was telling me, this is your chance. I later learned it was my bottom. I didn't know that you had it like that. I didn't know what a bottom was. I just later learned this was my opportunity, that the higher power and the hand of AA was reaching out to me. And I grabbed it, baby, because I did not want to go back to living the way that I was living. I called Jeannie. She says, come meet with me. I have an appointment on Wednesday. And I go in Wednesday, and we're having a great conversation about her. She tells me she's 20-something years sober, and she's been in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she's helped Jane a lot. She loves to help people who have addiction problems. And she says, tell me a little about you. And I give her my story, and at the end of our hour, she says, I think I can help you, but you're going to have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Well, I took a deep breath, and I said, you know, Jeannie, I don't know about AA. You know, I just kind of want to get my life back on track and not feel as bad as I have been feeling. And she goes, If you want me to work with you, I need you to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Jane will take you to your first meeting. I said, okay. Once again, the willingness is there. So we go to my first meeting the very next day. It was a cold November day. Deborah was chairing, and I don't remember 5 words that were said other than she was Deborah and she was a drug addict. But Jane was with me the whole time, and she'd hold my hand, and I'd look at her and just think, this is going to be okay. One of the first things Jeannie had me to do to get into action was to start a journal. And I brought it with me tonight. I told Don, our local speaker, whom I've heard several places around the country, at dinner last night, that I brought my journal with me, and I thought I might actually quote from a couple of passages. And he goes, nah, don't take any notes up there. Just speak from the heart. I said, okay, that's what I'll do. So I'm speaking from the heart when I can tell you that that journal, in the first 6 months, was one of the most prescient things I had ever written in my life. I knew I wanted something different. I knew I wanted the drama to stop. I knew I wanted the drinking to get under control, although I didn't know that I was an alcoholic. I just knew it had to be different. And throughout my writings over those first few months, there was always hope. I began to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to meetings religiously every day, twice a day when I could. We didn't have that many morning meetings, so I went to the ones that I could since my schedule put me in the evenings. And for the first 3 months there, I'm rocking along. Jeannie's helping me. And I'm beginning to feel like, you know, this big weight is finally lifted off me. You know. And then she says, okay, 3 months. I've worked you through these first 3 steps, which in her short form were, you can't, God can, I think you should let him. Now you got to go get a real sponsor. Okay, all right, I'll do that. And you have to tell him you're gay. Oh. The people in my meetings, I didn't think they wanted to hear that their anchor man was gay. But there was one guy that I latched onto. His name was Tex. He'd been sober about 10 years. He always talked a good program. He sounded in meetings like he was happy, joyous, and free, and he had beaten alcohol one day at a time. And I said, I want what you have. Will you sponsor me? He goes, pray about it. I prayed about it. 3 days later, I met him for lunch, and he says, I can't sponsor you. I'm working with too many people right now. Oh, geez, I was devastated. Yeah, so I go back and tell Jeannie, he's the first guy I ask, and he's turned me down. She says, you keep looking. He doesn't know what he's missing. I found a gay meeting in Shreveport, 90 minutes away, in just a matter of a couple of weeks. I started going to it on Sundays at the Unitarian Universalist Church, a beautiful setting out in the woods. I met my first sponsor, and I began to work those steps. Steve was a great guy. He had about 10 years as well. He's deeply spiritual. He had something more that Alcoholics Anonymous had brought him, and his spiritual journey was just amazing. And he's the one who first began to tell me, look, I'm hearing in our writings and our working that all you want to do is you want to attain this level, you want to go to this city, you want to live here, you want to get this. You got to quit looking at what's down the road, and you got to start looking at what's here right now. You've got to stay in today. He was the first person that helped me believe that I could do that. Oh, by the way, if that's God, just let me know, okay? He calls me all the time, I swear. The first fourth step that I worked with Steve, I was scared to death. And in fact, I took it back to him and he says, it's not complete. You got to go back and do it again. You're not getting into it. So I went back and I labored over it again and I wrote down all those people that came into mind and I really tried to be honest about my part in those resentments. And we did that fifth step that I'd been so scared to talk about myself with. I did it with him and he was like, okay, I understand. That's okay. I did something worse than that. And the next thing you know, another layer of the onion has been peeled off, and I'm feeling great, and all because of this program and the first months of sobriety. It's just amazing. That first year, it just went by like that. And now what I have learned is my journey needed to be filled with sobriety because there were going to be a lot of roadblocks once I got sober. Starting with, I got let go for my television job in Monroe. I told them I wanted to move to a larger city. And they decided they wanted to move for me. And in doing so, they ended my contract. Well, by this time, I had met my sobriety soulmate, Anthony, from Houston at the Houston Roundup. He had moved to Monroe. We'd set up a wonderful relationship there. And the next thing I know, I've gotten this roadblock thrown up, and I'm out of a job for 6 months. Well, just hang in there. Just go to meetings, put it out there, turn it over to your higher power. What's going to happen? You move down to Houston. You're living in the bigger city you wanted to live in. I get a job with a nonprofit agency, and I get away from broadcasting for a while, and I find out what it's like to help people, one-on-one. We did suicide prevention and anti-bullying, and it was great. Great meetings at the Lambda Center, got involved in the Roundup down there, got a great sponsor named Jay, whom I just love to death to this day. And everything's just rocking along. And we were there about a year or so, and Anthony felt the need for change in his life. He too is sober, and his sobriety journey was going to be different from mine. And we made a decision to break up. It was a healthy relationship. It was a healthy breakup. And we kept going to AA and honoring each other and honoring the spiritual gifts that we gave each other. For that, I'm grateful. And now, come to find out, Anthony's living in Los Angeles. He moved here just 1 month ago, and he's sitting up front, and I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you. So we're in Houston. My relationship has ended, but not my relationship with my higher power in AA, and we are learning in our own way how to become friends and continue a relationship differently. When I feel this big... Something's happening. It's 2001. We've had a flood in Houston. Enron is collapsing. We're leading up to 9/11. I just feel like something is going on. Something's changing in my life. And I can't quite figure out what it is. And my sponsor and I did some extra work on it. And the next thing you know, he's telling me, honey, he used to love to call me honey, you have got some change a-coming. You just be ready for it. Okay. Well, I got a phone call, and I got recruited for a nonprofit communications job in New York, where I really always wanted to go and to live and be, a Chelsea boy or whatever it is you be up there. Be in the big city. It's about the destination, remember? Once again, here it comes. Oh, New York, absolutely. They flew me up. We had a great interview. The director, unfortunately, was having some problems. His mom was dying at the time, and I didn't get to see a lot of him. So in 9 months after 9/11, I moved to New York, take my job, and the job goes to shit. I won't just bore you with the details, just suffice it to say the director and I didn't get along. It was represented as something different. And no matter how much I tried to please him and to please the agency, I couldn't do anything right. And everything just began to implode. Well, after my 90 days probation, they let me go. The first thing I did was to pick up that phone and call my old sponsor in Houston, because I was still sampling meetings in New York trying to figure out where I was going to light in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told Jay what happened, and he said, "Honey, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to a meeting." And 2 weeks later, God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I got an email from my old station in Monroe, Louisiana. Guy says, "I don't know where you are, don't have your phone number, but I got your email from a mutual friend. You need to call me." I call him, and he says, "Would you ever consider coming back and anchoring for us again?" So there I am in New York, $2,000 a month in an apartment that's this big. Unemployment, job hunt, sure thing back in Louisiana. Well, I took the sure thing. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when I left Houston, I went into my director's office to go to New York and say, "I've got this job up there. I really hate to tell you I'm leaving." And she burst into tears and said, "I was going to have to lay you off in 2 weeks." Okay, higher power, looking out, taking me somewhere else. Higher power takes me somewhere else. Lesson learned? What are the lessons learned here, John? Quit projecting, for Christ's sake. Live in today, work the steps, help another alcoholic, go to bed at night, thank your higher power for keeping you sober, and you do it again tomorrow. And it doesn't matter what city you do it in. It doesn't matter how much money you're making. And if you're in nonprofit, you're not making a lot of profit. So in 2003, I came back to Louisiana, and I have had an amazing time ever since. Yes, it was a struggle at first, wondering, why am I back here? But I am totally not the person that I was when I left in the late 90s. I'm different. Alcoholics Anonymous, this program has made me the person that I always knew I wanted to be. I just didn't really know how it was going to manifest itself. And now I can tell you that it's been an incredible journey back to Louisiana. We've had our ups and downs, floods, and as I mentioned, we're having flood problems right now. It's not affecting us. But then a month ago, my mom, my 92-year-old mom, and my brother, who were living over there on the farm that I grew up on, they got hit by a tornado. And I've been able to be there for them. I took off a little over a week from work, and I've been able to be there for them. And my brother's an untreated alcoholic, but I love him, and I know he's doing the best he can with what he is dealing with. And I made amends to him for the things that I did, and I forgave him for the things that he allowed to happen to me. So, you know, somebody read The Keys of the Kingdom last night, and that is so true in my life. In exchange for a bottle and a hangover, I've been given the keys of the kingdom. I've been given the ability to be a good, honest, hardworking person who loves to give back to the people who come to him and ask for his help, the people that I sponsor, the people that I mentor, my support group in AA. And for that, I am so absolutely grateful. And I've met an interesting person who's come into my life in the last 3 years, in Matt, and we're off on a new adventure in the next year or so, and I don't know where it's going to take us. And I don't have to. All I have to know today is that I'm sober and I'm a contributing member of Alcoholics Anonymous. What a wonderful fellowship and what a wonderful ride it has given me over these many years. Thank you very much, Los Angeles.